I think that strategic point is one that, at least for me, sort of resolved how I felt about what my voting choices were going to be between you and Dr. West, as two people whose politics I align with entirely, and whose records I respect a great deal. But as you can imagine, I think people like myself and others listeners to the podcast that respect you both and are trying to make a decision about what is the strategically most beneficial option for the left so that we are able to consolidate our votes rather than divide them. It is difficult on its face, and then it was made more difficult, I think, by certain pretty pointed criticisms from Dr. West about you personally and the Green campaign last time he was on the show. Now, I offered some pushback asking him to at least substantiate some of these criticisms so that we could judge for ourselves whether or not they were of merit. There was some ambivalence about doing so. I want to play you a clip and give you an opportunity to respond to those remarks for the first time.
Green Party got some of the best people in the world in terms of people who have a longevity of struggle for justice, but there'll never be a left that doesn't put white supremacy and empire at the center. And the Green Party's never ever done that. And so therefore, that was one of the reasons why I couldn't stay. There was also personal reasons why, in terms of my own relations, Jill Stein, and I saw her up close, and what I saw I didn't like, and therefore there was no way I could be able to follow through in that regard. And that's tip of the iceberg. I'm not going to get into all the details and what have you. And the same is true with Jill Stein or anybody else in the Green Party. The Green Party has been very much a force for good since 1992. I've supported Green Party candidates and so forth. But when you talk about individuals, Jill Stein is not the Green Party. If she's addicted to running for elections, that's different than the Green Party on the ground trying to be forces for good. And when Chris made the suggestion that I moved to the Green Party, I was glad to do that. I then got a close look from the inside at Jill Stein, and I was not impressed. I'm not anti-Green Party. I'm telling the truth about both certain leaders and individuals, and I'm saying the Green Party itself has never made white supremacy a fundamental issue of launching their critique of capitalism and imperialism.
Any detail? I'm not asking, for a transcript of whatever conversation you had, obviously. Right. But if
you can't take my word that I got a close look and I reached this conclusion and kept moving. That's enough. I don't want to.
Well, no, because Dr. West
details means that it just becomes a bigger and bigger distraction.
At another point, he said, I've lost all respect for Jill Stein. You heard him there say he thinks that you're addicted to running for president. When I tried to push and ask what it was about the Green Party and you specifically, he alluded to the idea that he was under some pressure within the Green Party to run his campaign a certain way, and that it seemed to have to do with the emphasis on racial justice issues, and whether or not the Green Party wanted him to emphasize something else or de-emphasize the focus on race. So how would you respond to those criticisms?
I have a sense, and I don't know because he hasn't really been willing to dialogue with me. And I have tried reaching out to his campaign and haven't been able to do that. My sense is that his feelings were very hurt that I jumped in to fill in the gap when he left the party. I don't think he quite understands how it works with ballot lines, that you have to use your ballot lines or you're going to lose them. So someone had to fill that role, and we only had like 3 weeks because all of a sudden he left. We didn't know that he was going. He didn't give us advance notice. All of a sudden it was a done deal. And when I was informed about that, I told them right then and there. I know I told Peter, his campaign manager, and I'm pretty sure, I know I brought this to the meeting because they then invited me to the team meeting. This happened, I think, on the weekend, and I was invited to come to the team meeting, I believe, on Monday of that week. And I told people that I would be under a huge amount of pressure to jump into the race because we had very little time to mobilize to be able to save our ballot lines. So it was going to fall to a candidate that has done this before and that has a team that could be quickly mobilized. So I let them know, that if they went ahead and did this, that I would probably be arm twisted into filling that gap, because that's what we've been doing for decades, is building the infrastructure for challenging empire. And were we going to drop that because Dr. West decided he didn't want to run with the party? No, we had asked him to run with the party. Not could we back him and abandon the party? No, we had asked him to run with the party. And then he changed his mind for whatever reasons. I heard a little bit of complaining that he was going to be required to attend 4 debates within the party. And I heard some complaining about that. And I said, well, let's dialogue about this, because you can do whatever you want. The party will tell you things, but you have to be able to push back against the party. And I think having to deal with a party, it's like dealing with an organization. If you have been a solo player for all of your life and done a great job with that and had a big impact as a lone voice, it's very hard then to start operating with a political party that you don't know, and to be building those relationships in the heat of the battle when you're really under fire, especially running for something like president. And Dr. West had never run for any office before, had never worked with any party until he was trying to work with the People's Party and discovered how complicated that was. And then we had hoped to rescue him from that. And then it just proved to be just more difficult than he wanted to put up with, because he has his own voice, which is very powerful. And I think he felt betrayed, thinking that my running for office, running to fill that gap, was a betrayal of my invitation to him to run with the party. But I think that was a misunderstanding. It wasn't like we wanted to put our decades worth of work to build a political infrastructure that could be here for the long haul. We didn't want to say, oh, forget that. We're abandoning our work of decades in order to support your campaign, Dr. West. No, it was, Dr. West, do you want to be the voice of this movement here? And it seemed like he did, and then he decided he didn't. And we didn't have much time to salvage our work of decades. And there was no way I was going to let that crumble.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because I could understand, and I've heard other people allude to as much. So, and I want you to respond to this as well, but I could understand if the argument is institutionally the sort of messaging approach of the Green Party is different than my own as a kind of a solo figure, as you described him, I think accurately. And that there might be a particular amount of sensitivity around that, given Dr. West's racial priorities, and let's say perhaps the stereotype / truth of the Green Party historically not being one that was especially diverse or particularly committed to the interest of Black Americans, as opposed to broader equality movements and all the other things that the Green Party stands for, but not in a particularized, specific, prioritized way that it has come across in Dr. West's work, academic work, personal life, and those kinds of things, right? So I can see how that could be the seed of conflict. That being said, it still was surprising to me to hear how much of what Dr. West said in that interview did seem to be focused at you, saying something like, I think Dr. Stein is addicted to running, felt like a very personal sort of statement. And when I pushed back, Dr. West asked, well, don't you believe me? Don't you take me at my word? Haven't I kind of earned that? And I said, well, yes, but so has Dr. Stein. And that's the problem here, that there are two figures who I think have earned a lot of respect. And given your unwillingness to be more specific and let us kind of assess whatever it is that's bothering you for ourselves, it leads me to the conclusion that I have to suspend whatever judgment I might be basing on what you're saying to me right now. I'm basically not take you at face value, at least until you're willing to disclose more. So I did want you to weigh in on that specific point, which is, do you think this has something to do with messaging around racial politics? And do you have any thoughts or critique about the Green Party and whether or not it needs to adjust at all on that particular issue?
Well, let me say, when I ran with Ajamu Baraka, our agenda was very much a product of the two of us. And, Black politics was as front and center as one can imagine. And Dr. West himself was an advocate and kind of a surrogate for that too. So I didn't see that. I really didn't see that as an issue. And a candidate can they create their own messaging. So that's why I think this was more a question of like understanding how you work with a party. A party may tell you what they want you to do, but you do what you want. At the end of the day, you are an independent campaign and you have enormous leeway to structure that campaign. The thing is, though, that people are going to approach you and say, well, what are your policies and can you justify them? And I think he got some pushback on some policies that were not front and center, and they were not racial justice policies. I think they had more to do with LGBTQ issues where he was getting some pushback. And not that he was getting terrible pushback, it's just people wanted to debate the issues. And that goes on all the time, in any organization, and certainly in the Green Party. You're going to have a lot of debate.
When you say pushback on LGBTQ issues, what kind of pushback? That the Green Party didn't feel like that those issues were sufficiently emphasized in Dr. West's campaign, or the other way around?
I wouldn't even say the Green Party. I would say that individuals within the Green Party who have special commitments on certain issues, they're going to want to debate, where do you stand on, on sports teams, and gender on sports. These are not kind of the leading issues or the front and center priorities of the party, but they matter a lot to members of the party. And so when you are a candidate for the party and a lot of people are doing work for you, they want to engage you and they want to know where you stand. And if they're not really wild about your positions, they're going to debate that with you. And I think that's that is a price you have to pay for working with a team. You have to respect your team. You have to be willing to debate and dialogue with them. And if you're used to being a solo, a solo entity, that can seem like it's kind of a pain. That's the only stuff I was aware of. That, and then, I know he got a lot of pushback around the, what's his name? The Russian, dissident. Navalny. He got pushed back around Navalny. I'm not sure where that fell in the scheme of things. I think that was after he had already left the party. But, things like that, you're going to be criticized. And anyone who runs for office, learns to start anticipating where you're going to be criticized and how you may need to moderate your message to anticipate that. And, I started off as his campaign manager just because we had to get him going very quickly. Not that I wanted to do that, but I knew how to do a lot of the stuff to get the groundwork laid. But I saw very early on that he was operating as a kind of a political novice, and it was very hard to give him advice. Like the stuff around Harlan Crow, accepting his contributions. We gave him a heads up about that right away. You don't want to accept that. You're going to get a lot of flack for doing that. And, Dr. West wanted to make up his own mind based on his principled positions, not on kind of just the realities of running for office where you want to pick your battles. You really want to choose which issues you're going to go to the mat on. And, it's hard for people who are running for the first time to suddenly have the, kind of the reflexes that you develop after a while. But if you're not running with an experienced team, forget it. You may be a strong voice in the wilderness, but you are not going to really contest for power with the empire. And, when it became clear that Dr. West wanted to run the campaign his way, I backed off, and I said, okay, run it the way you want, make the hires you want, et cetera. I'm not going to try to bring to this my, 20 years experience of running for office, go ahead and do it your own way. And I've just seen so many campaigns do that and, run into completely predictable problems that are going to, really limit what they can do in their race. And when that became clear, and then when Dr. West wanted to separate his campaign, it just felt like, okay, now we've got a genocide going on, empire has totally gone ballistic, empire and oligarchy and the climate change, they are taking us down, and this could be the last race where we actually can run a race. And we need to fight for a world that works for all of us here, like our lives depend on it. And, it was clear to me that at that point, we really needed to run with an experienced candidate, and we only had 3 weeks to pull it together. And, that's where Ajamu and I had our big debate about who would it be, and he won the argument. So I stepped up.
What was it? So Ajamu wanted you to be the candidate. Who did you want to be the candidate?
Ajamu.
Oh, I see. Oh, I didn't realize that that's what was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you say Ajamu won, what does that mean? Was there like a nominating process within the party and that his argument went over? Or
our argument between the two of us, that I was trying to twist his arm and he was trying to twist mine. And he finally said, I can't do it. I'm not going to do it. You have to do it.
I see. Okay. Well, we'll have to have him back on the podcast to maybe talk through that a little bit more, instead of asking you to read his mind on that. But I mean, what everything that you're saying about the stakes of this election and the, I think, unique opportunities that are being presented politically because of the tragedy that's happening in Gaza, there is a lane that's opened up. And even before that, there was a lane that existed because of how unpopular Biden and Trump in this rematch are with your average normie American, including, what was it, like 70+% of Democratic voters who didn't want Biden to be the nominee, and the fact that they completely suppressed a primary and all of these things. And so to see someone like RFK Jr. really take advantage of that opening, and then to see the left kind of fractured in this way. I mean, I think a lot of us were so excited when it was Dr. West with the Green Party, because then it felt like no one had to choose, no compromises had to be made. But now that the world is the way the world is, and what's happened has happened, I mean, do you think there is a point at which someone has to call for the left to consolidate around the candidate who, if for no other reason, the candidate that is going to have ballot access?
Well, and in fact, I think people who are strategic, who really understand presidential politics and the primacy of ballot access, there is no choice. There is only one campaign that is on track right now, that has most of the work done and is on track to complete that work. There is no choice. Otherwise, it's, a handful of ballot lines, and you can't make a campaign out of that. And, the media doesn't understand that, or they're not willing to acknowledge it, the mainstream media, and they pretend like all independent candidates are created equal. Unfortunately, we're not, and it's a fight for us to get on the ballot, and whoever wins that fight is the candidate. And there is absolutely no pathway forward for Dr. West. For example, he's talking about Texas, which would cost him many millions of dollars just for that state alone. He's talking about running there as a write-in candidate. So he doesn't know that Texas won't count write-in votes. It doesn't make any difference to be, and that's true in many states, and I dare say most states. You can't just declare yourself a write-in. You have to go through a process if they have a write-in process. So you can't do ballot access on your first time out. You really have to have worked with it. You need people who are experienced, who've worked with it. So, it was just very clear when Dr. West stepped away from millions upon millions of dollars worth of ballot lines, that there's no way he would be able to duplicate. It was just clear that this was not going to be a strategic campaign. That has continued to be borne out. As he remains kind of on the ballot for a handful of ballots. He recently accepted the nomination, where was this? I think in Colorado, of some centrist party, which is the equivalent of No Labels. So he's actually now running with a political party that, is totally centrist, and they sort of believe in common sense solutions that unify the Democratic and Republican parties, and it so dilutes his message and, it discredits his larger work here in the campaign. So, his campaign is continuing to stall, shall we say, He's got a fabulous message. He still has a fabulous message, but that doesn't get you, anywhere in a presidential election to have a strong message. So to me, this is all going to sort itself out very quickly. If you've seen the ballot maps that the New York Times published a couple days ago, You see that our campaign is way ahead, even compared to RFK with all his, millions of dollars and super PAC donors and all that. We're still
billionaire VP.
yeah, right. Yeah, we're still way ahead. I mean, there's no doubt he's going to be on the ballot, but he is going to have to be accountable one of these days. He pretends to be a peace candidate. And to say that, you have to pretend that the war in the Middle East is not a war, this war that could easily become, World War III and go nuclear very quickly. The U.S. and Israel are bombing some, 5 or 6 countries right now. We're in active hostilities, and this could go ballistic. Bibi Netanyahu is trying to drag us into a war with Iran. This is unbelievably dangerous. And, RFK is not being straightforward with his base. He's still trying to present himself as a peace candidate. So the Middle East is not peace, and it's not negligible. It's not like a footnote here. It's really central and maybe the most dangerous conflict that we are involved in right now.
Hey, YouTube. Thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.